This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. Scott Mestrezat is the first person to stand up paddleboard at the Missouri River. From June to September of 2013, starting at its headwaters in Montana and ending in St. Louis, Missouri. He traveled self-supported on a board he constructed. It was 107 days and 2,400 miles of lakes, river, wind, and heat. You can learn more about his adventure at MissouriRiverSUP.com. Scott Mestrezat, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Scott, I'm curious if you could talk a little about your background. What were you doing before the expedition?
Sure. It was nothing at all expedition related, that's for sure. I got a degree in biology and economics, and I got a job working in finance as a commodities trader, actually, right out of college. So I did that for 2 years and quickly discovered I didn't want to be doing that for a whole lot longer. So I, kind of decided to make this dream I've had for years a reality. It's something that just popped in my head years ago to go on an adventure like this, and slowly the actual idea of stand-up paddleboarding down the Missouri River came into being.
Yeah, I read through your blog, and you mentioned that you had some other ideas beyond stand-up paddleboarding for adventure ideas. What were some of those ideas? Yeah,
it was kind of a process. The first thing I've ever heard about someone doing a long-distance travel trip was Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods. I read that when I was like 12, and I think that kind of started me thinking about it. So, my original idea was hike the Appalachian Trail, and then I decided to keep looking around and see what the other options are, and then I thought, I'll kayak the Mississippi, and then I thought, maybe I could stand-up paddleboard the Mississippi, and then I eventually settled on stand-up paddleboarding in Missouri. I just really wanted to paddle through the mountains and go through Montana. So that kind of sealed the deal, that it was 700 miles through Montana. And I just liked stand-up paddleboarding. I started in 2008 and decided, it might not be the easiest route to take, but I was probably going to enjoy it a little more.
Scott, what do you think it is about stand-up paddleboarding? Because at least to me, it seems like over the last couple of years, it's a sport that's really exploded in popularity. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. You get a little sensation, and a lot of people have said this, that you feel like you're walking on water. I know for me, I just enjoy the extra element of balance. I've skied since I was 4. I just like doing things that have a little bit of a balance challenge to them. But, yeah, I don't really know. It's kind of funny because it kind of exploded like rollerblading did in the 90s, but hopefully it doesn't become, how people think of, I guess, rollerblading today, where it's not as cool as it once was.
So when did you decide, and why did you decide to build your own stand-up paddleboard?
I saw a movie about 2 guys paddling from, I forget where they left exactly, somewhere in Alaska down to Seattle, and they built their own kayaks. And, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely want to do that. So I just Googled stand-up paddleboard kit, or wooden stand-up paddleboard kit, and I found this company, CLCboats.com, and they seemed to be the only one that made a kit like this, and it was reasonably priced, and it looked like something I could do. So I just decided to go for it, and it was a great experience. It was just, I'm fairly handy, but, it doesn't, you don't have to be terribly handy to build it. It's a good instruction book.
So tell me a little about the process. And what were some of the things maybe you learned the hard way?
Well, I thought there was going to be some times where I glued something down and then realized, like, oh, no. But there wasn't any major mistakes like that. Basically, they ship you a pallet of wood. It's all pre-cut, and it's 14 feet long, so there's a couple sections that are 7 feet long, and they fit together like a puzzle piece, and you glue them together with fiberglass. So, yeah, you basically glue the long pieces together and then use copper wire and stitch the whole board together. And then you seal the seams with epoxy, which is thickened with sawdust, so it makes this really hard glue. And then once it's in its final shape, you sand all the edges round, and just get it sanded down really nicely. And then you cover it with fiberglass, and then the real sanding begins. You do like 3 coats of epoxy on the fiberglass, and then I think I went through 100 of those little sanding discs for your orbital sander. So it was a lot of sanding. And then after that, put some varnish on, and then mine had some bungee straps and foot pads and other things to put on. So it took about, I'd say about 4 weeks. I was actually finishing it as I drove to the headwaters. I stopped for a couple of days in Wyoming and put another coat of varnish on, and I only put it in the water for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes before I launched on the Missouri, just to make sure it would float, which I knew it would. But
yeah, when I was reading through your stuff, I thought, wow, he's really pushing it to the last minute with this construction.
Yeah, for sure. I was just incredibly busy before I left, trying to, situate everything in my life to be able to basically disappear for 100 days. So things were pretty hectic. So not everything that I wanted to do got done, but I just was so set on my launch date because, at some point, if you wait for everything to be perfect, you're never going to go and do it. So I just stuck to that launch date and, figured I'd find a way and I'd get it done, which brings me to my cart. I thought, it'd be nice to have a little dolly to wheel everything around when I have to go around dams. Well, that was one of those things that waited till the last minute. I think I finished the cart at like midnight the night before I launched. I made a PVC pipe with lawnmower wheels with my friend in a hotel room, the night before I launched, and that thing ended up being terrible. But it got me through whenever there was decent ground, which was rare. It could hold some stuff, but the cart actually broke and punched a hole through the board at one point. But so I threw it out about halfway down.
Mm. So what did you name your boat?
I named it the Muddy Moose, and the day before I put the fiberglass on, I thought, I'll see if I can find some last minute decorations for the board. So I went to the fabric store and I found this moose that had an American flag on it. It's like the whole moose looked like an American flag, and it was only about 4 inches wide. I thought, oh, that's perfect. So I put that right in front of the foot pad. So there's a little moose laminated under the fiberglass. So, and I was going down the Big Muddy, so I figured I'd name it the Muddy Moose, and it stuck. And another reason the name worked well is when I launched it, I had 1 can of moose drool brown ale left over from the trip out there. I took a week in Wyoming. So my friend and I christened the new boat with a can of moose drool for the Muddy Moose, which went down the Muddy, Missouri.
Scott, where did you start in Montana?
I started at the headwaters in Three Forks, Montana. It's where 3 rivers come together to form the Missouri. The absolute source is a little spring in the mountains about 300 miles away, and this is where the actual Missouri River is formed. So I launched a mile up the Madison to make sure I hit all the Missouri and traveled down to Madison and into the Missouri. It's a pretty picturesque place. It's worth visiting if you're ever close to Bozeman.
Let's talk about the expedition. I don't know about the best way to do it because it's a lot of days, it's a lot of miles. But one of the ways I thought maybe we could talk about it is, by state. What are the states that you went through? What do you remember about each one?
Oh, man. Okay, so I'll go through them one by one. You go through Montana. I spent a little over a month there. And Montana, there's nothing like it as far as scenery. Like, I was expecting pretty big things and some pretty amazing scenery, and it just totally blew me away. It's unbelievable. It also had the worst mosquitoes, but overall, mosquitoes weren't terrible. So, that definitely wins the award for best scenery for sure. And I've driven through eastern Montana, and I thought, well, that's going to be flat and boring, and it was not flat and boring. It was still scenic the whole way through. And then North Dakota, I spent almost a month, like 27 days, I would guess. And the sunsets there were the best sunsets I've ever seen. It was like every single day the sky would just be purple or bright red or something like that. And then South Dakota, I spent 20-something days there. And that, the whole trip, I ran into just these great people. People want to help me out the whole way. Yeah, I had heard about, river angels or trail angels if you're doing Appalachian Trail or something like that, but I really didn't expect it to the degree I saw it. There's just so many nice people and so many people that said, hey, you want a beer? And I was invited into people's homes a few nights to get out of the heat and sleep, and I guess that would probably be late August. So North South Dakota had great people, and then the rest of the states I spent much less time in. Nebraska, it was just kind of continued all those three themes so far, like good scenery, surprisingly good scenery, because when you drive through it, it's pretty boring. Good people, and Iowa, I was only there for a week or so, and the whole state of Iowa along the Missouri is lined with wild sunflowers, which is pretty cool. And then I was in Kansas for 3 days, hillier than I would have thought again, and good people. And in Missouri for about 17 days. That was just cool because there's all these little towns along the river. It's the river there is much more settled. So you have these 100-year-old towns where it was nice because at that point in the trip I was real sick of eating the food I had with me. So I'd jump into one of these towns for lunch or try to plan it so I'd hit them around dinner time or so.
So what were you eating?
Well, I started out with a lot of freeze-dried food because that's really easy. You boil water and you pour it in a foil packet. You eat it right out of the packet and there's no cleanup. That's it. But they're a little pricey and they're kind of hard to find when you're in the middle of nowhere. So once those ran out, I started eating just like instant noodles, packets of tuna, a ton of peanut butter. I've had just an incredible amount of peanut butter that summer. Snickers bars. I easily ate 100 Snickers bars this summer. All kinds of stuff. Anything that you can cook with just boiling water, I ate it. And then the other thing is, when you're in these tiny little towns, a lot of times the grocery stores just don't have that much. So, you just take what you can get. Fruit, apples, they travel well. Pretty much only fruit I can take with me because everything else would squish. And vegetables lacked a little bit. So whenever I was at a restaurant, I tried to find something with vegetables.
Scott, what was the most challenging part of the expedition for you?
It was definitely the winds in South Dakota. So there's about 700 miles of lakes along the Missouri because it's very dammed up. And I had made it through the 3 big lakes, which is, 500 or 600 miles of them. So then there's this little lake, by comparison, it was 80 some miles long. And I thought, okay, I'll get across this in about 3 days. Well, I just got southeast wind after southeast wind, day after day. I was just pounding in my face, and I just couldn't make progress, and I started getting sick a little bit. I'd wake up with a headache and body aches, and the camping was just garbage. The side of the lake was full of steep riverbanks, and there was a week there where I was just not a happy camper, literally. And actually, at one point, a mouse chewed through my tent and pooped in my hat and then chewed its way out. And that was, when I woke up that morning, I was like, oh, jeez, it can't get a whole lot worse. But once I got there, from that point, I was about 100 miles to, or maybe 150 miles to the current. And then once I hit the current, the last 800 miles are pretty smooth sailing.
So before you hit the current, how much time did you have to spend off your board kind of pushing it? I usually wouldn't bother. There was, in a 107-day trip, I paddled about 80 days. So whenever the wind was more than 15 miles an hour, in your face, there's really no point because you are going 1.5 miles an hour, if that, and you're just so exhausted. So I would instead just lay low, lay in my tent, or if I was at a campground, find some Wi-Fi if I could, and sit it out. And then when the conditions were good, I would go for 13 hours some days just to get off these lakes. But there was the last sizable lake. I had 15 miles to go, and I probably walked 7 of them. And that seemed to be the last day on, 2 or 3 of those lakes were just the worst. But I was so close, I just wanted to get off of them. So I'd end up just walking through the water for 7, 8 miles or so. And then paddling when I'd have to, when the shoreline, took too much of a bend where it'd just be easier to kneel down and paddle. So more so than walking, to get across some bays and stuff, I would just kneel down and paddle as hard as I could to get across. But that's really uncomfortable. So, yeah, not too much. Maybe in the whole
in 2,300 miles, I might have walked like 30 through the water. So it's not too bad, but those are rough miles.
What kind of consideration do you have to give to your gear? I mean, compared to somebody that might be kayaking and you're on a stand-up paddleboard, what differences is there between what gear you can take and what gear they would be able to take?
You know, there probably isn't so much difference in gear, just how I store it. So a kayak paddles with a couple different kayakers on my trip, and one of them is actually still out there. Her name's Janet Moreland, and she's going all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. But the difference is they have to pack everything in smaller bags and fit their boat like puzzle pieces and stuff them in all the nooks and crannies. And I just had these really big bags where I threw everything in and just plopped them on top of the board. So I had total, I think, 5 dry bags. You know, there's smaller bags inside, so for organized stuff. But so it was almost nicer in a way because in the morning or at night, I was so much faster to load and unload than a kayaker who needed to get all their stuff out. So that was pretty nice. But waves just pound your stuff all day long when it's wavy. Anything important like electronics, I would have double or triple dry bag just in case because, you know, water will always find a way into anything. But for the most part, I stayed fairly protected. So nothing lost. And I had a lot of camera gear, and I had my computer, and I had Aquapack dry bags, and I really like their stuff, especially for their electronics, because nothing got lost. So I'm happy with that.
Speaking of Janet Moreland, I did speak with her. I thought it was interesting that at one point you were in an REI, and you met Norm Miller's girlfriend, who then... Yeah. So did you ever meet Norm Miller?
No. Actually, that's kind of funny. So it's the day before I launch. It's like 6 p.m. the night before. So I'm at REI in Bozeman. I bought a lot of stuff that I probably should have had by then, but I had this list in my phone for a couple months, and I had a shopping cart full of stuff. And so the lady helping me just asked, "What are you gearing up for?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, no way, my boyfriend paddled upriver in 2004. I was like, "That's crazy." So she gave me his phone number, and I talked to him for maybe an hour that night, and that was really good because one of the things that I didn't do as much of that I would have liked before getting out there was researching the river. And so he answered a lot of questions I had. And then even more importantly, he got me in this Facebook group of Missouri River paddlers who had done the river before. So whenever I had any question, I would just post it, and then a couple hours later, there's like 3 responses. So if I'm like, "Oh, I'm going into this town, is there a place to eat along the water?" Simple stuff like that could be answered from this group. So that was great.
Yeah, and I brought up Janet because that was sort of the connection that you had with her was the Norm Miller thing, but also there was I'm going to forget this guy's name, but he had written the book, and you had met this person.
Yeah, Dave Miller.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called The Complete Paddler, and if you do the Missouri, pretty much you really want this book. It just has every mile detailed. So you know where the campgrounds are, and more importantly, you know where there's water and what campgrounds don't have water and what does have water. So that was really essential, just knowing that, there's supposed to be water in 40 miles. So that puts you at ease a little bit. So I ended up, he just happened to be in Great Falls, Montana when I was there. So we went out for a beer and just talked about the river.
A portion of it you got to paddle with your dad. How was that?
Oh, yeah, that was great. So after 9 days of paddling, I reached Great Falls, and then he was set to arrive about 4 or 5 days later. So I want to make sure I beat him there because my schedule is a little more flexible. So he joined me from Fort Benton to James Kip, which is basically the middle of nowhere. But there's a lot of outfitters in that area because it's just a beautiful section, and the current's strong, so it's easy to paddle. There's also the muddiest section of the entire river, but it's called the White Cliffs, and there's white cliffs along the river, and it looks just untouched. It's totally scenic. It's great. We met there. That was a section I saw the most other people paddling, and we just ended up meeting really good groups of people along the way. It kind of took us in, and it was really cool to share some of the river with them, especially at that early stage where I still wasn't entirely sure what way ahead. I hadn't hit any of the big lakes, and so there's a little uncertainty, but that was a nice 7 days and 150 miles together. So that was a pretty cool thing that we were able to do. So I'm really happy he made it out.
What type of boat was your father using?
He rented a Kevlar canoe from an outfitter. So he flew in Great Falls, and they drove him to Fort Benton and went and picked him and the canoe up after and drove him back to the airport. So that worked out pretty well. It was a pretty big boat, so he had some trouble with some wind, but other than that, it was pretty comfortable.
How did your board hold up? Did it ever get damaged?
Yeah, it held up great, considering what I put it through. Right at the 750-mile marker into my trip, I was on a big lake called Lake Sakakawea, and it was a really windy day, and the waves were pushing towards shore. Well, I was looking for a campground with a shower, and I saw a building, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to go see if that's it. So now I have a fin on the bottom of the board, so I can't just leave it in the water when there's waves because it'll just get knocked into shore and risk damaging that fin. So there was a log, and I thought, I'll just slide the board over the log. Well, I had over 100 pounds of stuff on my board, and I must have slid it over like a little knot in the log or something because I ended up punching a hole through the board. And it would have, it's not the fault of the board. It's a strong board. I just shouldn't have been so aggressive to rock the board back and forth to get over this log because I was lazy and didn't want to unload it. And the building wasn't the shower. Anyways, so I got a hole. But I ended up being stranded for for the day right by the campground. I had a little store and shower, so it could have been worse. So I had a fully loaded board, and I was wheeling it down the boat ramp with my little cart, and it was made out of PVC pipes. When the pipes popped out of its socket, and with 100 pounds of gear, it fell onto the broken cart and another hole. And then the third one, I was paddling right along a cliff, right along the shore, so I could be sheltered from the sun by a cliff. And I hit a rock, and I hit so many rocks with my fin, but this time I really hit it. So the board completely stopped, and I kept going and flew into the water, and that just kind of broke the fin box. But they were pretty simple repairs. I had some quick dry epoxy, and I let it set for like an hour, and then it cures underwater, and I just keep going. But right now my board is sitting on my balcony in Chicago, and it's really scraped up. I didn't even bother cleaning the grime off of it, and I don't think I ever will. But I used it a couple times since I've been back, and it's still going.
So your board held up pretty good. How about you physically?
I'd say better than I thought. I thought, I had some issues. Towards the end, with like 400 miles to go, I woke up about a day away from Kansas City in the middle of the night, and my hands were just like locked like I was holding a paddle. And they were pretty tight and kind of painful, so I'd wiggle my fingers, and that happened every night for the rest of the trip. But I think like 2 nights after that, I was done. They were fine. But they were pretty sore for a while there. And my knee was giving me some trouble, and at the end, my feet, which I thought I had all kinds of trouble. I thought I would have all kinds of trouble with my feet because they were constantly wet for 3 months. Like, they just never really dried out. But it wasn't until the last 3 weeks or so that they just got disgusting and really dry, cracky skin, and my arches were killing me. But for the most part, everything healed up. So, yeah, I'm happy about that because I wasn't entirely sure.
Scott, were you able to finance this expedition yourself? Yeah.
I've had this in mind for a long time, so I've just been socking money away for it. I did have some help from sponsors as far as getting me some gear, like the board and some dry bags and some other discounts on stuff. But, for the most part, it was all on me. But it was part of a grand plan I had, I guess, like 5 years ago, so I was prepared for it.
You mentioned in your blog that you kept getting warned about the river from people and that people have this irrational fear of the river. Tell me about that.
Oh, yeah. And it just increased as you went down. In Montana, everybody I talked to warned me about Fort Peck Lake, which is the first big lake. It's like 130 miles long. And, they'd all say, oh, the wind can blow there. Storms will come out of nowhere. Yeah, that can happen, but I I didn't know what these people wanted me to tell them. Like, I was going to go into it. I was going to stay at a reasonable distance from shore, and if things kicked up, I would just sit the day out. It just turns out I had decent weather. I never had to sit a day out, so I got across in 6 days. But later on, the next big lake, I sat out like 3 or 4 days because there would be like 5-foot waves, and I would paddle in them if the wind was at my back, but when the wind's in your face, there's no chance. Yeah, and then people will warn you about like the Indian reservations, and it's all based on 1 or 2 incidents that have happened in the last 10 years, which, it's understandable to be careful, but I really wasn't too concerned. And then once you're back into the current, it's like everyone you talk to is like, oh, you got to watch out for barges. Okay, I will. Like, barges, you can see them from a mile away, and as long as you stay out of your way, they're fine, and they have a really big wake, but it's nothing compared to the waves on the lakes. So I don't know. It was just, I think what it is, fishermen or whoever, 1 or 2 of them ends up having an accident a year or so, and then that's the only thing people hear about the river farther down. You don't ever hear anything good about it, or about kayakers going down or anything good. It's just like, oh, so-and-so got tangled in their line and fell out of the boat and got sucked under by the current, and there was a whirlpool and they died, or something crazy like that. So there's just nothing. They just take those as the only information.
Sure.
So I think people are just scared of things they don't know about. And I thought, people, for the most part, were the most scared of the river in the section of current at the end, the channelized section. And I thought that was, I guess, pretty safe because I wasn't as tired when I was paddling it. There wasn't waves to, like, just knock my board into shore, when I was unloading or whatever. So, yeah, you'll get warned about everything, but you can't take other people's fear with you.
You had an opportunity to speak at the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation's annual meeting. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I just happened to be in Bismarck at the same time as their annual meeting. And there was an article about me in the Bismarck Tribune. So a guy called me up and said, hey, you probably don't even know this is happening, but if you're going to be in Bismarck for a couple days, come on by. We'd love to have you. And it just so happened that I was going to spend a week in Bismarck because my girlfriend Rachel came out to visit. She drove like 13 hours to come see me for a week on her week off. So I was around. So we went to their, I guess, opening night, their opening ceremonies, and I wasn't expecting to talk or anything. And the president of the organization said, hey, I want to introduce you. Can you go up there and talk for like 2 minutes? I said, oh, sure. So that was probably the scariest moment of the trip. I was in front of, 200 Lewis and Clarkers, as they call themselves sometimes, and I got up there and said, basically I don't know a whole lot about Lewis and Clark, but I'm hoping to find out more, and just, talked about my trip for a little bit. And then after that, I got 20 business cards from people down the river, and they said, oh, when you get to mile whatever, you get to this town, and you need anything at all, just hit me up, and people gave me places to stay, and it was a really great experience because I met all kinds of people along the way, or in Bismarck that I met the rest of the way down again. So it was pretty good chance encounter there.
Yeah, definitely. You also were nominated for SUP Magazine's Top Expedition of 2013 award. Have they announced?
I did not win.
Oh, you didn't. Oh. That's
a
disappointing.
guy who is paddling the perimeter of Florida won it. But that was a pretty cool honor and something I didn't know was a thing, but it was pretty fun to be nominated because there were some pretty impressive other contenders for that. So, I don't know. I just never really thought of something like that happening, but it was pretty cool.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I read on your blog something about Big City Mountaineers. Yeah.
They're an organization that takes kids from inner city areas and gets them outside into the wilderness and gives them opportunities outdoors that they wouldn't otherwise get. Because, you can make outdoor activities cheap, like hiking and stuff, but, everything costs money, so it basically gives kids chances to just experience, things they wouldn't, to give them learning experiences and new opportunities. There's a page on my blog where people can donate to them. So, yeah, go check that out and send some money their way. They seem like a really great organization.
Any plans for a book or a movie?
Probably not a book, but I'm currently putting together a documentary of the trip. I have like 500 gigs of photos and video that I shot along the way. So I'm hoping to really start making some progress on that. I have everything organized and I've just begun. So hopefully in a couple months I'll have that out for people to see.
If you were going to do this again, Scott, what's one thing that you would do differently?
I don't know if I would do anything differently. Especially, if I had to put myself back knowing what I knew before I started, I don't know if I do anything differently then. Maybe do a little more research before, but it worked out. And, like I said, there was a really good guidebook, so I got caught up pretty quickly. I probably nothing. Even now, even knowing what I know now, I don't think I would really change anything. But if I were to ever, say, do the Missouri again, which I don't plan on doing, I'd probably take a kayak just because it'd be a little faster.
What was your biggest takeaway from the expedition?
That's a question that people like to ask, and I really, it's one of those that's hard to answer. It was just such a good all-around experience, just seeing the sights I saw and meeting great random people. I guess the biggest takeaway is it kind of helped restore some faith in humanity, because I really had no bad encounters with people, I guess. And then the other thing is, when I was doing the trip, nothing made me happier than finding a place that had a restaurant, laundry, and a shower. So it's the little things. If you break it down and, take away the little things, it's really nice to get them back, I guess.
Scott, what's next for you?
Well, as far as trips, I don't have anything in the pipeline, but I'm just back in Chicago trying to get a couple little businesses going, doing some real estate stuff and some videography stuff. So that's what's on the docket right now. But, maybe in a few years there'll be something else like this. I don't know.
How can people contact you if they want to learn more about the expedition?
Sure. Just go to MissouriRiverSUP.com. That's MissouriRiverSUP.com. And there's a page that you can contact me through email. Or I also have a Facebook page, which is Missouri River SUP Adventure. And that just had all kinds of pictures from the trip. And I'll still be posting updates on the video. I actually haven't finished the blog yet. I'm still, I think, 175, or I still have 170 miles to go. I just haven't. It's those last couple posts that are just so hard because you want to say it right, but it's hard to put in words when you're approaching the end. So there's still a couple more posts to come on the blog. Okay,
Scott Mestrezat, congratulations on making it happen. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul.
Recorded October 29, 2013. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.